NewsGuard is after totalitarianism, right? It's soft totalitarianism because they're making you believe that you're being protected.
It's a potent tool for the left to completely silence conservative voices, because what we found through our research is that NewsGuard is extremely biased towards the left.
NewsGuard is trying to establish itself as the gatekeeper of the internet. Its nutrition labels are designed to help fight so-called misinformation and assess a website's credibility. But who is behind NewsGuard, and how exactly does it work? On this week's episode of CensorTrack with Paiten, I embarked on a quest to expose NewsGuard and its checkered past of bias. Let's start at the beginning. What is NewsGuard?
NewsGuard is an organization that has essentially self-declared that they are the fact checkers of the internet.
We identified 9 basic apolitical criteria of journalistic practice, and our analysts have applied that now to all of the news and information sources that account for 95% of engagement. That means as people thumb through their Facebook feed or Twitter feed or look at a search result, if it's from a news or information source, it'll come with a green icon or a red icon and a quite detailed nutrition label explaining the trustworthiness of that site.
They get to decide what is truth and what is false, what is information that the public is allowed to hear, and what information the public is not allowed to hear. What they believe is that there is a certain narrative that the audience should hear, and there is a narrative that is only provided to the elites, and only once it's filtered through the elites, the rest of the public should hear it. And they also recognize that media is an incredibly powerful way to influence the way people think. And so controlling the media is essentially controlling the narrative, and that controls people's minds and behaviors and ultimately gives them totalitarian control.
The good news, again, about the internet is that anybody can be a publisher. The bad news about the internet is that anybody can be a publisher.
Right.
What we found through our research is that NewsGuard is extremely biased towards the left.
I know you wrote a study comparing NewsGuard's ratings of different outlets, so tell me what you found in your research.
Well, the recent study that I did is actually a follow-up based on a study that I did released in December of 2021 that examined the bias of how NewsGuard treats right-leaning news sites versus left-leaning news sites based on a media bias chart provided by all sides, which is considered to be neutral. Even the Liberal Poynter Institute for Media Studies has given it credibility. So what we did is that we took all sides' media list, like its list of media, by how it characterizes organizations based on their right-to-left bias. And what we did is that we just compared the scores. And what we found originally was a 93 to 66 disparity in favor of left-wing outlets. Left-wing outlets had an average rating of 93 out of 100, whereas right-leaning outlets received a 66. So we decided, okay, we're gonna wait a year, and then we're gonna do the same study again. Using the same bias chart, we're gonna see if the needle has moved in one way or the other. So we did the same thing, and the needle has barely moved. Now the ratings disparity is 91 out of 100 average for left-leaning outlets, and still 66 out of 100 for right-leaning outlets. The bias still remains the same. And you're talking about outlets like USA Today, New York Times, NBC News, all of them have gotten higher ratings. But if you look at conservative or right-leaning outlets, let's just take the Federalist, for example. The Federalist was arguably the poorest rated on NewsGuard's criteria. I think they got like a 12.5 out of 100, which is abysmal. USA Today was caught, had done an investigation, I believe it was into one of their reporters, Gabriela Miranda, and found that few of her stories included fabricated sources. Well, if you're supposed to be a referee for journalism, that's a big no-no. But guess what? USA Today's perfect 100 out of 100 score was left untouched. So we looked at that and we're saying, okay, how in the world are you going to present yourself as being somehow neutral? But meanwhile, here is a gross case of journalistic malfeasance, and yet you're keeping their score untouched. They're flawless. And what's funny is that NewsGuard even noted in its nutrition label at the time the scandal. But yet they still gave USA Today a perfect score. And it gets even worse than that. When we looked into, we wanted to go to the extremes. We wanted to see how USA Today well, not USA Today, how NewsGuard treated Chinese state propaganda outlets. So these are news outlets that are directly affiliated with the Communist Chinese Party. And we wanted to see, okay, how does it rate these outlets in comparison to other outlets based in the US? So what we found was astonishing. So for example, if you take the China Global Times, it has a failing grade of 39.5 out of 100. But guess what? The Federalist, which is a US-based outlet, got a 12.5. So the Federalist is considered to be less credible than Chinese state propaganda. The China Daily also had a similar rating, and the Federalist only has 12.5. One American News has 17.5. Newsmax has 15 out of 100. These outlets based in the US are considered to be less credible than communist Chinese propaganda outlets. It just goes to show that it cannot be trusted. It cannot be trusted as a neutral source. And for it to propagate itself as such is just extremely dishonest. If I was just to put into one line about what NewsGuard is, it is a self-created ministry of truth.
Let me give you an example of what has happened here at PragerU. And this is really how I found out about NewsGuard. So a couple of years ago, all of our videos were serviced by a company called JW Player. And essentially, because we can't host our videos on our own, we use a third-party internet company to plug into our website to help service our videos. And one day we get an email from JW Player saying that they are refusing to work with us anymore. They don't want to renew their contract, and all our videos must be taken off their platform because they're shutting us down. And so we went ahead and asked, well, why are you shutting us down? Why wouldn't you want to work with us? And they responded and said, because you're a fake news company and NewsGuard labeled you as fake news. And so we don't want to work with organizations that are essentially purporting bad information.
I'm glad you mentioned their power, because I'd like to touch on that for a second. When you hear of NewsGuard, you kind of think it's like, oh, this I've never heard of this organization, but they are very well connected. Can you share a little bit about who is behind NewsGuard?
So I didn't know anything about NewsGuard until 2 years ago, and I've been in media for 11 years. And so they do work behind the scenes. As we started investigating who's involved, who's on our board, we discovered unbelievable information. They received $750,000 from the Department of Defense last year. On their board, the former head of the CIA. On their board, head of Wikipedia. On their board, people who are involved in the European Union. And they have this is the biggest element for me. It was just mind-blowing when I found this out. They have an official partnership. And by the way, you can go ahead and look it up. If you can even Google it, surprisingly enough. They have an official partnership with Publicis. Publicis is one of the largest communication groups in the world. They represent much of Big Pharma, and it is no surprise why NewsGuard came after us so hard when we were talking about COVID. And so when you see the type of partnerships and the people who either provide funding to NewsGuard or partner with NewsGuard or are sitting on their board or have these relationships with them, then you realize, okay, well, now I know why you don't want me to talk about, fossil fuels. Now we know why you're so aggressive when we make videos about climate change. Now we understand why you don't like that we speak against the lockdowns. It becomes very, very suspicious, and certainly there's a huge feeling that we're losing our freedom of speech and freedom of press when you have these kinds of companies putting that kind of pressure on media companies.
NewsGuard seems to have wormed its way into the hearts of legacy media. Outlets including NBC News, The New York Times, and USA Today have cited NewsGuard, attempting to prop it up as a neutral measuring stick for online credibility.
NewsGuard's whole operation is being given a lot of oxygen by the media. And the thing is, the more that the media continue to cite them and push them as some sort of neutral arbiter, I mean, the more powerful it becomes, so to speak. So it loves this. NewsGuard loves all of the media attention that it gets. So they, and it's funny because the outlets that are propping this outfit up are the very ones that get glowing ratings from NewsGuard to begin with.
I wanted to understand why these media outlets seem to be ignoring NewsGuard's blatant bias. So MRC's Joseph Vasquez and I decided to call up outlets that have cited NewsGuard in an attempt to get their side of the story. Hi, this is Paiten Iselin with MRC Free Speech America. I was hoping to talk to someone at the New York Times about the New York Times citing NewsGuard.
Hello, my name is Joseph Vasquez, and I'm with the Media Research Center's Free Speech America division.
I wanted to talk to you about CBS News' use of NewsGuard.
I wanted to talk with you about your subsidiary, USA Today, citing NewsGuard as a credible and unbiased website ratings firm.
So if you could call me back, that'd be great. Again, my name is Paiten Iselin with MRC Free Speech America. Thank you. Hope to hear from you. We called. We emailed. Not one response to our questions. It seemed no one wanted to talk about NewsGuard. But why? If NewsGuard is the gold standard of internet credibility that it claims to be, why aren't legacy media outlets willing to justify their use of NewsGuard?
Well, the legacy media in general are like, there's us and then there's the right-wing conspiracy. We are information and you're misinformation. One of the ways the media could build trust is by actually responding to upstart media. But their contempt for upstart media would include refusing to respond. It's that arrogance that the other side is always misinformation or always scheming, always a conspiracy. It's one thing you would suggest that liberals and conservatives see themselves as the good guys and the other side's the bad guys. But when you're posing as I'm the guardian of facts, that's where it falls apart.
So what do you think the path forward is?
The first step is information. I think the public needs to be aware. And I actually think that the First Amendment at this point in our time needs to be our number one issue that we actually fight for. I think that people have all kinds of passions, right? Whether they're concerned about the border, they're concerned about security, they might be concerned about, abortion was a big issue in the last election. None of these issues that matter to you should matter as much as freedom of speech, because you cannot advocate for anything if you don't have freedom of speech. And so next time we vote, we speak, we write an article, we advocate for something that matters to us, at the forefront of our advocacy needs to be freedom of speech. And we will lose freedom of speech if NewsGuard continues to gain more power.
Join MRC Free Speech America and pro-free speech organizations like PragerU in holding big tech accountable. PragerU has a petition for supporters to sign to help them fight back against NewsGuard. It can be found by visiting their website, prageru.com. We must continue to call on big tech and media companies to mirror the First Amendment, provide transparency, clarity on so-called hate speech, and equal footing for conservatives. If you like this video, share it with others. Every like, comment, and share helps us achieve our mission of combating and neutralizing big tech bias and censorship. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on CensorTrack with Paiten.